In 1971, as the Vietnam War was in its 16th year, Congressman Robert Steele of Connecticut and Morgan Murphy of Illinois made a discovery that shocked the American public. When they visited the troops, they found that more than 15% of the American troops stationed there were heroin addicts. Follow-up research revealed that 35% of service members in Vietnam had tried heroin and as many as 20% were addicted. The problem was even worse than they first thought. The discovery sparked much activity in Washington, including the creation of President Nixon's Office of Special Action for the Prevention of Drug Abuse to promote prevention and rehabilitation and to track addicted service members when they return home. One of the researchers in charge is Lee Robbins. In a discovery that completely changed accepted beliefs about addiction, Robbins found that when soldiers who had become heroin users returned home, only 5% of them were back addicted within a year, and only 12% were back addicted within 3 years. In other words, about 9 out of 10 soldiers who used heroin in Vietnam dropped their addiction almost immediately. This finding contradicted the prevailing view at the time, which regarded heroin addiction as a permanent and irreversible condition. In contrast, Robbins suggests that addictions can spontaneously go away if there is a radical change in the environment. In Vietnam, soldiers spent all day surrounded by the signals that trigger heroin use. They were easily accessible, they were engaged in the constant stress of war, they forged friendships with fellow soldiers who were also heroin users, and they were thousands of miles from home. After a soldier returns to the United States, he finds himself in an environment that lacks those triggers. When context changes, habits change too. Compare this situation with the usual drug user. A person becomes addicted at home or with friends, goes to a clinic to purge, which is devoid of all the environmental stimuli that triggered the habit, then returns to their old environment with all of the previous triggers that got them addicted in the first place. It is not surprising that usually we see completely different numbers from Vietnamese studies. Typically, 90% of heroin users become addicted again once they come home from rehab. The Vietnamese studies contradict many of our cultural beliefs about bad habits by challenging conventional associations of unhealthy behavior as moral weakness. If you're overweight, a smoker, or addicted, you've been told your whole life that it's because you lack self-control. It's even possible that you're a terrible person. The idea that a little discipline will solve all of our problems is deeply ingrained in our culture. However, recent research suggests something different. When scientists analyzed people who appeared to have extraordinary self-control, they found that these individuals were not too different from those who struggled. In contrast, disciplined people are better at building their lives in such a way that it doesn't require heroic strength and self-control. In other words, they spend less time in tempting situations. The people with the best self-control are usually the ones who need it the least. It's easier to practice self-restraint when you don't need to use it as often. So, yes, persistence, determination and willpower are essential for success, but the way to improve those qualities is not by expecting you to become a more disciplined person, but by creating a more disciplined environment. This counterintuitive idea makes even more sense when you understand what happens when a habit forms in the brain. Habits that have been encoded in the mind are ready to be used whenever the relevant situation arises. When Patty Allwell, a therapist from Austin, Texas, started smoking, she often smoked while riding horses with a friend. Eventually, he quit smoking and avoided it for years. He also gave up horseback riding. Decades later, he was on horseback again and felt the urge to smoke a cigarette for the first time in a long time. Q is still internalized, he just hadn't been exposed to them in a long time. Bad habits can be triggered by the surrounding environment that contains stimuli or cues, so techniques to change inappropriate behavior can be counterproductive. Bad habits tend to exacerbate the feelings they are trying to overcome with the habit. The phenomenon of cue-induced wanting can occur in which external stimuli trigger a compulsive desire to repeat a bad habit. Bad habits that have been formed in the brain are difficult to erase, even if they are not used for a long time. Self-control strategies are only effective in the short term, so it's better to optimize the surrounding environment so that cues from good habits become clearer and cues from bad habits become invisible.